That was the first Christmas that I felt like I just had fun and I was myself, and I made some gay jokes and we laughed, and I started involving them in my friends and telling them about my friends, and they know that I'm going to Carlos and Joe's wedding in Costa Rica, and they ask about Ward, and she's like, I want to see pictures, and, they'll eventually meet him, when they come to New York or we go there, but it's exciting now to see, and something that's been really healing for me has been the journey of my parents. Seeing how they've learned to deal with it and learned to accept it and be okay with it, which also in turn helped me quite a bit, because I felt like it was just as hard for me to accept it for myself as it was for my parents, I mean, I was the one that was dealing with it and struggling and trying to convince myself that I was okay with it, but...
Why do you think that is? I mean, when did you... I mean, at a very young age, when these things were happening, did you ever think, I'm gay, or did you just think... You didn't think that, or you did?
No. Yeah, always. I always knew that I was. I don't know exactly, I don't know what term I would have used for it, but I knew that I was...
So why do you
Some of my earliest memories are being gay and wanting to be a dancer. Those are my... I remember crushes on all the neighborhood boys and wanting to, and locking myself in the basement and dancing, or putting my mom's cooking aprons and spinning circles and choreographing numbers for them,
So what do you think makes it so hard, has made it so hard for you to accept it, if you've been living with the knowledge, at least, that's who you are from a very young age?
I think because my mother and I are very similar, and she had come from a very dysfunctional home, and my older brother was, who I love now, but he was a big problem kid growing up, and I was kind of labeled as I was my mother's golden child. I was the one that she liked showing off my talent. For some reason, I just really sought approval from my mother. And my mother was always much more involved in the church and much more... She was an angry woman growing up. There was a lot of anger, so it instilled a lot of fear. And I remember when my clogging teacher thing, that whole thing came out, I think the way my mother dealt with it was scare tactics for me. And I remember this experience. I didn't remember this until just this last January. I was journaling and doing some things, and I remember this experience where we fought so much. There was so much tension between us because of the fear that I was gay, and she thought that she was scared that I was going to molest my little brothers, and she told me that I was going to turn out just like my clogging teacher, and I was going to touch little boys' pee-pees, and that's what... there was so much tension between us that these things would... And she was so angry and so on the defense all the time, and so scared that all these terrible things came out of her mouth, which she absolutely regrets, but all this stuff instilled so much fear of being gay, in myself too. But the one time we got in a huge fight, and screaming and hollering, and I locked myself in my room, and I put my back up against the door and put my feet up against the dresser, and I was bawling, and I was plugging my ears, and I was screaming, and my mother was on the other side of the door, like, reading The Miracle of Forgiveness, like, just screaming about, homosexuality, how perverted and awful, and all, that whole section on homosexuality, and I was 12 years old, and as much as I know my mother was just acting out of fear and trying to, that affected me, and all that stuff, stayed really, really tight, and it's hard to let that go, and it's been a lot of therapy for me, It's interesting to see all my different friends, the group of friends out here, certain friends that have an easy time coming out, our friend Paul was raised in San Francisco with a father who was an artist, but they were very active Mormons, but that seems to be a very, I wouldn't say he had an easy time, but, it was easier for his parents to accept because they had been involved, they were familiar with gay people, they were...
So do you think it's more cultural than religious?
I think that has a lot to do with it. I think my culture definitely had a lot, we were white trash redneck farmers in Idaho, never exposed to anything. Yeah, definitely.
So what about the mission?
Oh, geez. Well, I'd come out and then I'd gone back in the closet and I was working in Tokyo for Disney, and I was really active, really proud. I'd been through the temple at this point. I think it had been about 3 years since I had joined the church, or become active in the church again. I'd been through my repentance process, and my bishop in Tokyo said, I was 24. My bishop said, well, why don't you go on a mission? And I was like, no, I can't go on a mission. I was like, well, why not? It's like, well, I've done things in the past that, they don't allow you to go. And he's like, I really think you should go. He's like, well, you've gone through the temple, you've gone through the repentance process, it's been 3 years, There's no reason you shouldn't go. We can get your papers in and get you out on the mission field before you're 25. And I kept thinking, and and lots of prayers. I was so consumed by my being Mormon at the time. I'd lock myself in my room and I'd read my scriptures for hours, every night. It's like I was so terrified of being involved with anybody else because I was afraid that I was so weak that I would crumble, so I really, even though I was friendly with other people, I would still very much keep to myself and not show a whole lot of personality. I was so set on that this is what I had to be that I tried really hard to be that. And so I started praying and just thought, if I can go on a mission, I should probably go. So felt really good about it, and I was in Tokyo, and I was, by myself, but talked to my mom on the phone, and we cried and cried and cried, and thought that it was amazing, and started filling out my paperwork, and I had to find an English doctor to get my physical and do all this stuff, and went through my initial interviews and started buying suits and shirts and getting ready to go, and all the money that I was going to save from that job in Tokyo would pay for my entire mission, and it just seemed perfect, and the bishop said, I don't need to know anything that happened, I don't need to know anything that went on, it's been 3 years, you've gone through the repentance process, you're temple worthy, let's get you out in the field. And so we prepared, and then came time for my stake president, my bishop's interview and my stake president's interview. They were scheduled for one night, and we went in there. I went in there, and he said, we need to know what happened and what went on, and I felt a little bit deceived and a little bit betrayed because he'd told me for several months, you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me anything. I don't need to know that. That's in the past. We don't need to know. And so I told him, and they both felt like they would still send in the papers and they were okay with it. And then I just never got a response back.